In the mid-2000s, director James Mangold smashed 2 home runs all the way out of the park. The first was 2005's Johnny Cash biopic, Walk the Line. Mangold got an Oscar-winning performance out of Reese Witherspoon and a ridiculously good performance from Joaquin Phoenix in the title role. A role that fell short of Oscar glory, but did snag him a nomination for Best Actor and a fair share of acclaim by itself. Just 2 short years later, Mangold was responsible for one of the most unappreciated westerns of all time, 3:10 to Yuma. Russell Crowe, Christian Bale, and a quietly terrifying Ben Foster helped prove that Mangold was no fluke. He's directed some hot garbage for sure, like 2010's Night and Day, but when he makes a good movie, he makes a good movie. His best is probably either the previously mentioned Walk the Line or the complete masterpiece that was 2017's Logan. Seriously, I could make an impassioned case for Logan being the best comic book movie of all time, and it's kinda hard to argue against that. Mangold is also slated to take the reins on Indiana Jones 5, which has me all kinds of hyped, but with the extremely mixed response to the last movie, there's a lot that could still go wrong. So, all of that brings us to 2019's Ford vs. Ferrari, a fantastic, funny, engaging driving film with its own unique place in the pantheon of great sports films. Mangold has gathered together an immensely talented cast to tell this tale, anchored by a very Matt Damon performance from, well, Matt Damon, and an always terrific Christian Bale. This is definitely one of the most entertaining films of all last year. Sports movies tend to be about more than just sports. They're about things like family, friendship, failure, fighting through adversity, and Ford vs. Ferrari is most definitely all of those things. It's got your douchey executives, the douchey executive that isn't quite as douchey as we're first led to believe. It's got your antagonistic drivers, and your high-stakes one-upmanship and politicking. But here's the thing about Ford vs. Ferrari. When you couple these elements with a great score and soundtrack, and a visceral look at what it felt like to drive one of these cars in the 60s, you get a movie that does everything extremely well. Christian Bale plays hot-tempered English racing driver Ken Miles to an absolute T. You never get a phoned-in performance from Bale, and he dumps every ounce of his acting talent into a movie role that could easily have been played by a lesser man. Mangold also directed Bale in 3:10 to Yuma, a quiet performance from the actor filled with subtlety and nuance. His role here is mostly a 180, with the sometimes quiet, sometimes obnoxious Miles stealing every scene in which he's a participant. If Bale's a chess piece in his films, he's a pawn in 3:10 to Yuma and the king in Ford vs. Ferrari. If you have a basic understanding of the history of automobiles, you've heard of the Shelby Mustang. Legendary car designer Carroll Shelby, who sadly passed away in 2012, is played by the always reliable Matt Damon. Shelby was something of a celebrity in the 60s, and Damon finally, if you pardon the obnoxious pun, walks the line between that autograph-signing celebrity and an everyman who just likes working on cars. So I've laid out the pieces that are in play, but what is Ford vs. Ferrari actually about? Well, Carroll Shelby was hired by Ford to design a racing car in an era where they were known for churning out boring vehicles by the thousands, and the racing market at the same time was completely cornered by Ferrari. Henry Ford II desperately wanted Shelby to design a car with the sole purpose of beating Ferrari at the 24 Hours of Le Mans in France. That's a brutal race that tests the endurance of both the drivers and the teams involved. Much of the film centers around Ford wanting to publicly humiliate the Italian brand and establish Ford as a player on the stage of international racing. On the other hand, you've got Carroll Shelby, who knows that the fiery and volatile Ken Miles has the driving intangibles to win one of the most grueling races on the planet. But Ford is concerned about keeping their squeaky clean image as the all-American car for the all-American family intact. With all of these big personalities and high-stakes politics, you would think that the human elements of the story would be lost in the mix, but you would be wrong. Ford vs. Ferrari is about a lot of those things, but the things I mentioned earlier, friends, family, adversity, failure, those are the things that Ford vs. Ferrari is really about. With much of the country on lockdown due to the current global pandemic, this is one of the easiest films in the world to recommend. I would hesitate to call this a crowd pleaser, but it's a great movie and one that should motivate you to put away your phone and watch it with your family. This is a small movie about big stakes, and I mean that as the biggest compliment I can give. Thank you so much for listening. If you like my content, please like, subscribe, share, or comment below, and I will see you next time.